Well, our final stop is a once working plantation that's worth a visit anytime you're in West Tennessee. Alvex is just outside of Grand Junction, Tennessee, to bring us the story behind the historic Ames Plantation.
It's tucked away in Fayette County in the southwestern part of Tennessee, and it gives us a chance to take a look at what life was like before most of us were born. It's the Ames Plantation, and today it's part of what was once one of the largest plantations in Tennessee back in the early 1800s when cotton was king. Now, the role of the Ames Plantation has changed since that time, of course, but there are those who are working very hard to preserve the past of the Ames Plantation for the future. Rick Carlisle is one of those in charge of the preservation effort these days. It's all under the umbrella of the Hobart Ames Foundation, and the mission is very simple.
The primary mission is to try to enforce the will of the late Miss Julia Colony Ames. And that is, upon her death, they created the Hobart Ames Foundation to own and operate the Ames Plantation for the benefit of the University of Tennessee. And in her will, she had two primary objectives. One is to maintain the grounds and the administrative support for the running of the national championship for field trialing bird dogs for perpetuity. And the other was to provide an educational location for individuals, for students within the College of Agriculture at the University of Tennessee to get hands-on experience with agriculture. It was first owned by the Jones family. Henry Mormons, or Micaiah Mormon, settled this area, and then John Walker Jones married his daughter Martha, and they moved to this area. So the Jones family first built this house in 1847. They built the center section of the house first, and sometime before 1900 they built the west wing, and then Mr. Ames purchased it in 1901, and he added the east wing, which is basically the servants' quarters.
The furnishings that we see, did Mrs. Ames buy this, or is this of the period, as they would say?
This was of Mr. and Ms. Ames's day. They purchased a lot of this furniture, and when she died in 1950, the house is as it was. We put up some new curtains, but basically the furniture and the furnishings are the same.
But the house was never allowed to deteriorate at all, was it?
No, sir, it's been occupied just about the entire time, either by the Jones family or by the Ames family. Mr. Ames first moved here and purchased the house in 1901, and then he started on leasing buying spree. It purchased initially 450 acres, until he had amassed, to the present day, we have 18,563.
The stable was his pride and joy?
The stable was his pride and joy. It was completed in 1913, and at that time was considered one of the most elaborate stables in the South, and we think it still ranks up there today. It has the brick floors and the brass latches in the doors. It was a unique building because it was a prefab building that was designed and built by Chicago Bridge and Iron in Chicago, Illinois, and then transported down here and erected on site.
Of course, it's the big house that gets the most attention here at the Ames Plantation, but there were other structures on the property, maybe not quite as lavish, but according to Jamie Evans, played as much a part of the history of the Ames Plantation as the big house.
That's a statement that I make often, is that it's the manor house, the Southern plantation tradition, that gets so much of the attention in press, in the home tours, the historic home tours, and so on, that so many communities hold. What many people don't realize is that that's not a clear depiction of the southern antebellum South. As a matter of fact, I've been told that roughly 3 to 5% of the population actually lived the southern plantation lifestyle. With the exception of the barn and the corn crib, all the buildings you'll see today were either reconstructed or were actually relocated from different areas on Ames Plantation property. What we've tried to do here concerning the small family farmstead is we've tried to replicate that environment that is oftentimes missed and when one looks at the history of the area. And we have a collection of buildings here that would have been very typical for the family farmstead, scattered. They were by the thousands throughout southwestern Tennessee, and for that matter throughout the region, of the landowner's house and the associated outbuildings such as the corn crib, the smokehouse, the barn. Many times there was a blacksmith shop, as we have here, and oftentimes there were slave houses as well. And we have an example of each of those here in the farmstead area.
There are probably many of you who might know of the Ames Plantation, but for a completely different reason. Thousands come here every year for the National Field Trial Championship, which is held here on the plantation grounds.
The National Championship has been here since 1914, run continuously since that time.
Is this something that Hobart Ames was heavily involved in?
Yes, he was. The bird dogs were a passion of his, and he judged the National Championship for 20 years. And therefore, he and Mrs. Ames both are in the Field Trial Hall of Fame, but they both had the desire to have this place as a home of the National Championship for field trialing bird dogs.
The operation of the Ames Plantation these days is under the direction of the Hobart Ames Foundation. It's a private organization, and while access to the plantation is somewhat limited, Rick says people are more than welcome to pay a visit.
We do welcome visitors. The manor house here is open for tours on the fourth Thursday afternoon from April to October. And then any special groups that would like to come in of 20 or more just have to call and make arrangements in advance. But we will open the house up and give a tour of the house.
Are you emotionally involved or just physically involved with this?
No, I'm emotionally involved. I'm in my 20th year here, and this gets into your blood. This is probably the closest that I'll ever come to owning a place of this size. And we view the employees that work here and myself view this as ours, and we take care of it just like we owned it. And the trustees are appreciative of that we look at it from that standpoint.